Okay. Apparently, there's a new feature in the chat thing. I'm gonna have to check out that. Talking about managing moderators, a new trick for Blackie to learn. So, good evening, everybody, and I hope those of you that are out in the cold right now, things warm up, get better. Good evening, Will. How you doing? Right now, it's like 63, 64 here. The rain is about to cross over us, probably by an hour or so or less from now. And so if my internet gets spotty, we may have to sign off early. And I got a little bit of a tummy bug, so we may have to sign off early too. So either way. Hello, Mopar. How you doing? Mr. Johnny, CJ, good evening. Mike Simmons, hello, sir. Oh, Jerry, 44 in Choctaw County. Yeah, you're on the other side of this cold line. I'm going camping this weekend. We're leaving out tomorrow morning to go to Duggar Mountain to camp with the Southeast Bushcraft Base Camp group up on Duggar Mountain. And it's going to be in the 20s. Well, at the base of the mountain, I'm saying it's going to be like 28, something like that, or 24, something like that. Well, we're going to be a 1,000 feet up in elevation, so it's probably going to be a little cooler up there. So we shall see. Mike Bolton, good evening. To Washington State, 26. Snowing, yep. Gunsmith, good evening. And the question is going to be of once this Arctic air moves out and goes on through New England and all like that, how bad is it going to affect everybody up there? So let me see if I can dampen that glare down just a little bit, guys. There we go. Joseph, hello to Columbus, Ohio. Yeah, it's been a busy couple of days for me down here trying to get things done. I finally got the video shot, which will be posting this Sunday for the hot, or me just opening it up and showing you different configurations of it, how it can be set up as a gigantic tarp. It's 5 full steps from go front, back, and 4 steps across when you open it up flat like that. So it's like 15 feet by 12 feet. And then whenever it's closed up for an A-frame, or one side up and this side down, which forms a giant, will lean to. And so it's very, I'm very happy with it. And that's what I'll be using up on the mountain. I've got a big old sack of lump charcoal, which is just basically charred wood. And I'm going to pack a little stove full of that and put a fire lighter underneath it and get it going. Once I get the bed of coals going, I can just take a shovelful, open the door, and push it in like a coal stove. We see how that works. Yeah, Will, I've got friends, Justin Coons in Texas. He's talking about all the ice and everything there. And I saw a post a couple of hours ago of a group of like 5 or 6 big Jeeps all hooked together in tandem to help tow 18-wheelers up this hill to get them over an obstacle out there. It's bad storm. Jerry Tanner, yep, last of the hunting season. I think it goes in Alabama for another week as far as deer. Now, hog doesn't go out of season. So that's when I usually start thinking about serious hog hunting, is February, because it's still cool, but the deer hunters are out of the field and it's not so dangerous to be out there. Observation Post Charlie, good evening. Outdoors we're on, good evening. Mike Bolton, thank you very much. Jerry, yeah, here it is, all the oak ponds are budding out. The grass turned green and it's 8 inches deep along some of the sunny sides of the ditches and stuff. That waxy looking wet grass that's just new and shoots right up in front of your face, seems like. Everything's budding out. The robins is here. Everything's saying an early spring. So me moving my event back into March probably was a good idea. I hope it isn't too hot, or too mean like that. But I'm trying to hit that 4 week window like I've talked about when it's not so hot and it's mosquitoes haven't mashed out. But I'm predicting this cold snap's going to go out. It's going to warm up like spring conditions, and then the 1st of April, you have another cold snap. And then that should be it, you know. Mike, yeah, I saw that brace band got over. They know it ain't going to hold up. There's 40 million of those in circulation, and the Supreme Court already ruled that common usage, 40 million counts as common usage. So, good evening, Diane. Hello. Diane, did you see the video I posted on the cylinder gap on percussion revolvers? I had several people asking me about that, about what were they doing wrong. And I was like, where are you measuring it? They were measuring it at the hammer down, and it's wide as possible then. And they thought it was way too loose. And I said, cock the hammer and then measure it. That tells you what the actual measurement is. Good. Glad you did. Farm board, good evening. Things gonna, I think this weather's going to move on through. And I'm really kind of surprised, you know. Well, back that up. If you go look at geo weather and you look like the polar satellite looking down on the top of the world, you'll see how this Arctic air is oscillating, and it kind of dips down into Europe, it dips down into us, it dips down into Asia, it dips down into Siberia. It's like a ballerina spinning around and dropping into these holes in places. And it's really, I've been kind of surprised in the last day or two that it has not moved out a little further than it has. I figured it would just dip down and go right north, but it kind of stayed. I remember, what was it, last year before, and it moved into Texas and just sat there. You know, it was warmer in Alaska than it was in Texas. Rocklet, good evening. Ben, good evening. Ben, I got a little bit of a tummy bug. You know, it just happens. My wife works in a drugstore. She's around sick people all the time. And she has this magic ability to come home and say, I feel bad, and I'm sick for a week and a half. I've got no resistance to her germs. I'm healthy as a horse everywhere else, but from her germs. So, just got to hang in there. I'm bolting for trip wires. What do you prefer? I like the very thin green wire that you get for making floral arrangement and stuff like that. Also, good snare wire. Glad to do it, Earl. Mark, I saw that band rain coming through. We're right on that edge. That cold air's up there, and all this warm air. That's when it got 70 and so down here in my area. That warm air is flowing straight up the Gulf, and you know you're going to get a lot of rain. It's going to be a huge rainmaker up through there. Jared, good evening. Benton, good evening. Hiram, hello. Now, if Chelsea Scott gets in here, Chelsea, y'all, last time we talked, someone was talking about the young lady that was in quite a few of my videos, big lady, Chelsea Scott. If she's in here, her handle is Art by Chelsea, I think it is. And so apparently she got in here and made a couple of comments last time, and I missed her. So I'm sorry if she's listening down. Say hi, Chelsea, so I can acknowledge that you're there. But what is everybody thinking about the spring? You know, planning on fishing, got more hunting in mind, or what? You know, I'm already thinking about fishing. And I'll do a couple overnights, take my canoe back over to the lake and take my fly rod out and play with it some. I used to really love canoeing and fishing. Really, really did. I kind of got away from it a little bit. And so I'd like to get back to it a little bit, enjoy it. As I mentioned last time, I tried kayaking, did not fit blade, had to fall out of the thing. You know, it was a sit on top of a kayak, but it's so low when I get my foot cocked up under me, I got no lift power to get out of it. So I'd rather have a canoe where I can go forward and grab hold of the gunnels and just step out of it. I know I can do that in my sleep, but we shall see. Jerry, turkeys, I hear you. Bear has got a lot of good turkey on his land. In fact, several times we go down there and we'll come into this big clearing and there'll be a big flock of turkeys down at the far end. And he keeps bugging me, wanting us to go turkey hunt one day. Turkeys are tough, guys. Turkeys are much better eyesight than this. They can see you blink at 100 yards. And so you got to be absolutely still and silent. And it can be a real challenge, especially if you're going to do it with a muzzle-loading shotgun. Grandpa, cool. Hiram, excellent. In Arizona, y'all get any of those? I saw where all those bands of rain came through California. Did that get into any of y'all out there in Arizona? If so, y'all don't. That neck of the woods don't have a lot of cover, and so a lot of rain means a lot of flood in a hurry. A lot of your cities don't even have big drainage ditches or the water sewers to get water off the streets. They don't have a big pipe because it doesn't rain that much. Jake, I'm oh, John, awesome. Vanderbilt, I want canoe there at least once. Um, I'm going to be running my garden again this year, which I call it my garden. It's just a handful of little plants we put out. And last year, I got really lucky on this little cherry tomato plant that I had that it made tomatoes all the way up to December. And finally, even though I was trying to protect the house, put a grow light on it and everything, after I brought it in when it was dropping down in the 20s, finally I brought it in and protected it, and it didn't last inside 2 weeks. You know, even with the grow light on it and everything. But I saved some of them seeds, and I'm gonna try. I've already started putting in little cups. I'm gonna see if I can get that. And hopefully, it was not a hybrid, and it'll grow from a seed because I'd like that. And that produced a lot. And those little potatoes grow fast. And there's like a handful of grapes of them, 10, 12 of them at a time. And it's easy to just make little slices and make tomato sandwiches or put them into soups and stews or whatever. I like it better than I do the big ones, to be honest. Tough. Awesome. I have not been out into that. I've been into desert in Texas, but I have not been out in Arizona and etc. I've known people that have, and I've spent a lot of time out there. I had a very good friend that was a geologist that part of his job was he had to go around. He worked for the state, and so they would send him on these, 2-month trips basically, and he had to spend time. He spent time on White Mountain, I believe it is, Apache Reservation. And he was only supposed to be there 3 weeks. Well, he stayed there almost 9 months. The tribe kind of adopted him. And he got, they said, as a public interest type thing and stuff. They just kept telling him stay. If they're happy with you, stay. And so he stayed there. Thank you very much, John. A lot of information out in Arizona and stuff. And then he left there, and they sent him to study volcanic features in Alaska. And so it's supposed to be him and 2 or 3 other guys, and they flew him up on a bush plane, and he was dead to the world tired. They landed, and it's where the sun don't really go down. It was early enough in the year where the sun would dip down and run right around and come back up. It's not, it'd go right below the horizon, but you still see. And he was so exhausted, he just set up his tent, climbed in, he went to sleep. And he said he woke up and he heard something rustling around outside the door. Well, in Arizona, there'd been peccaries, those javelina and stuff around where he was. said, in my mind, I was not in Alaska. I was still in Arizona. So he just reached over and grabbed his camera and rammed it out the door and hit the flash. And it, blah, 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 blah. He took about 20, 30 pictures high speed. And he heard the sound of something taking off, and he laid back down. He went back to sleep. Like 4 months after he got back, he developed that film. And here's the nose of a bear. It was a grizzly looking at him. He seemed like going back. The grizzly was 2 feet from him whenever he went to clicking in the face. Just luck. But old John Craner, he went all over the place, and he was talking about being in desert, being in, they sent him to Hawaii for a while even. I'd love to be able to do it and go experience all that terrain in those places. I'd be a fish out of water out there in Arizona with you guys, because I'm so used to cover and trees and navigation and stuff like that. But you never know. Tim, good evening to Tennessee. Jazz, yeah. I've heard that mushroom stuff and the leftovers are very good for weedless gardens and stuff. They kind of keep the weeds down. Yeah, that's one of the reasons I like bucket gardening or container gardening of some kind. Because down here in my area, you have hurricanes and crap and tornadoes, bad weather and stuff like that. And having seen so many gardens of family members and stuff just destroyed by storms or by the fact that the deer finally got to it or whatever, being able to move a garden, actually move it from A to B to get better sun. Because right now I put it here and it starts out, we ain't hardly got no leaves on the trees and I get plenty of sun and life is great. And then a month later, poof, it's nothing but leaves. We ain't getting no sun. So I got to move the garden further out to get it to a better location. And or things I got that need a little more shade, be right on the twilight edge. I got to move them. I like bucket gardening for that very reason. I can pick it up and move it. And that makes it look a whole lot easier. A hand truck and bucket gardens, dude, you can move the whole garden. And we've had, severe line of storms coming. They've probably destroyed the tomato plants just by the winds and all with them. I had picked them up and put them on the front porch before we'd be sheltered, and or pull them all together tight and wrap them up, in some way to keep them protected. For me, it's the best way to go. John, I would love to. I wish I could. I just got to work out this new system that the YouTube came up with the way they pay us. It took a big hunk out of my money, but it's because they want you to do shorts, they want you to do memberships, and they want you to do your videos. And so I'm trying to find my way back into how I can make money have that. But I will one day see the boundary waters. I've seen them, but I'll see them from a canoe. When I traveled and drove a truck years ago, I went up into that neck of the woods quite a bit. And I even got to drive across frozen lake up there one time. So I've seen it, but I would love to see it from a canoe. Boy, good evening, Kentucky, sir. Hang tough, exactly. Grandpa Buckshot, awesome. What size round ball are you doing? I got a curve bullet recently. Someone sent me some samples and fell in love with it, dude. I mean, my 1860 Shiloh loves it. I mean, it shoots tight grooves, target accuracy, and I'm now trying it out in my other guns. So I don't normally run round ball for day-to-day use normally. But I mean, dang, I'm getting such accuracy out of it. I'm getting to just start keeping it loaded with that, when I go to the field. So, but me and Bear need to get together, and I need to get some more lead. Is what I do, because I ran out of lead recently. I was running 375 round ball, and I did 451 and the curve bullets, and I ran out of lead. I got to dig some more out. And me and Bear like to do what we call running ball, casting bullets. In this time of year when it's cool, we go to his place you see with the old ways videos. That's on his family land, and we got a electrical hookup, and we just plug up 2 or 3 of them on that shelf and sit there and be casting bullets and run up a couple of hundred for every kind we need. And we haven't done that this year. We're out there before it's hot, because it is no fun trying to sit there and melt lead in 100-degree heat. Forest Witch, well, hello. Thank you for driving in. And hello, Oklahoma. That's correct. They're trying to compete with TikTok. But 90% of what I do, I can't put in that small video. What I do is in-depth stuff. I'm trying to teach or show or explain, and try to do it that quick. But I will be using it like I did today as a question. That way I am technically posting them, but I can ask my followers and things questions and see feedback from you guys is where I'm going to use it. Good evening, Miss Pam. Jake, yeah, the 6x6 concrete mesh will hang on through tornadoes. Should do good except for direct hit. Grandma got you. That's me too. I understand. Have y'all seen where the hay bale, you take a bale of hay and you soak it, and then you let it go through a heat, and it generates heat up like 100 degrees. And it'll do that for days and days, weeks even. And I see where people up north will use that to do like a greenhouse, where they'll put a couple of hay bales inside of a bisqueen plastic framed building to put their plants in there and actually plant into the hay bales. Well, the hay bales are generating heat, but nothing freezes. As long as you got the sun and you got the stuff, they can start the plants off where they don't have that long a growing season. Or down in my neck of the woods, it's heat's our big factor. We basically plant things in February, and it's probably going to grow because we've got the sun, we've got the light, and we normally got the temps, And while you're probably still going to have a good cold snap in there somewhere, you probably have to cover them up or something. Other than that, it'll be fine. But I've often seen things about that, about using hay bales for that. I've often wondered about a cabin. Could I use a hay bale trick like that to heat a cabin in the winter, like a hunting lodge or something? You know what I mean? I might have to investigate it. Po' boy, what would cause soup beans to turn greenish blue when you cook them in a cast iron bean pot over a fire? Okay. Was the pot seasoned with like modern stuff like Get, or was it seasoned with cooking oil, baking grease, or whatever? Could that be somehow reacting? You're not using any kind of copper spoon, copper plate, copper bowl, or anything in this operation. You didn't soak them in a copper type thing, because copper will make green. But I don't know beyond that. It doesn't ring a bell off the top of my head, but wish I could tell you more, but that's about it, I think. Now, the question is it safe to eat? That's the question. When in doubt, throw it out. That's my thing. It's like when the wife comes in with the milk and goes, "Taste this, is this burnt?" Honey, I trust you. If you think it's burnt, throw it out. Don't wait for me to test it to find out. Chunkin' Steel, hello, brother. Larry, hello. Mike Simmons, what I like to do is I take topsoil and peat moss is what I put together. And then for tomatoes, I put fish. Now, used to what we did when I was young was you'd run a trot line, and then you put the fish heads and guts, and you put that underneath the tomato plant, and that made big tomatoes. It also worked for a couple other things, but I've seen people wrinkle their nose up when I try to put fish guts to the plant, but hey, it works. Yeah, Cheddar, that's one thing. They do have to get in there to pollinate stuff. Check it still, it can. You initially submerge that and completely saturate that hay, bale, and you bring it back out. It can get so hot it can combust. And that's the reason you have to heat them and then set them out someplace open and let them go through the heat. And you put a monitor on, a temperature monitor. And when the temperature drops back down beyond that, because I think it gets up 300 or 400 degrees for X amount of time, and then it'll drop back down to like 120, 125. That's whenever they'd move them inside of their greenhouses to heat the greenhouse. But I've often wondered, could I do that in some sort of cabin setting or whatever, or maybe in a hot tent? It'd be a lot of work. I know. I'm always looking for that angle I can think of. Camping all out. Hello. Mitch, hello to Virginia. East Kentucky, correct. It can combust. So that's the reason I saw a real good documentary on it several years ago. People up in, I want to say it was Michigan, and they were using it in a greenhouse to start plants early, so that this would bring the temperature of their greenhouse, keep it in the 50s or 60s at night in those cold winter nights. And that way the plants would be kept warm. They actually poke a hole into the actual hay bale and plant with a handful of dirt in the hay bale, and that would keep them warm. So I've seen that, but I haven't seen it personally or up close. I have camped in Virginia. In fact, I have been to rendezvous in Virginia and West Virginia before. Beautiful country. I assume, for which I assume a big pile of coffee bean waste grounds could, make up a mound of it. I know that we used to put them into the chicken pen as a wormer, and we used to feed the coffee grounds to dogs, mix it with eggs, and feed it to dogs as a wormer. But that was a long time ago, and that was Maxwell House coffee. And my uncle swore about it, that it would, for his hunting dogs, that kept them wormed. I don't know, not a veterinarian. Okay. Pepper Dan, good evening, sir. Good to hear about you. Oh, where you gave the feedback to William. Good job. You're officially a WC9 field tester now. I don't hang tough. I don't wipe with vinegar. What I do is I just take finish using the cast iron, getting the food out of it. I'll then put water on it and put it right back into the heat. Bring the water to a boil. That'll soften anything I left in there. Then I'll take a scrubber of some kind, which a lot of times is one of those sage pot scrubbers we keep in the kitchen just for this, or some non-marring soft scrubber. And you pour the water out, break it, rinse it real good, dry it out, put a drop or two of cooking oil in it, and smear it real good to cover it. And that's how I clean my pots and pans, which they've been used 40 years too. And so they're non-stick, but that's how I do it. And whenever it's been hanging on the shelf, we haven't used this one in 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to use it tonight. First thing that happens, you put full of water and put it on fire and you bring it to the boil. And that sanitizes anything that could have been there is now gone. So once it's been boiling 4 or 5 minutes, I'll take it off the heat, pour the water in the sink, put it back on, now add oil and start cooking with it. And that way, I've never had a problem with it that way. keeps it clean, and it keeps any problems of bacteria or whatever, which I've never seen one turn green, but you know what I mean. Usually these are in such rotation, the cast iron does hit a chance. It's going to be used once or twice a day. But it's that big pot, something that you put back in the cabinet and you only use it around the holidays where you need a big pot. That one will do that. Boil, dump, go back. So. Coffee grounds and eggshells do good. Bones, good. You can take chicken bones, stuff like that. After you get done eating it, just bust it up. Put that underneath the plants. Like I said, fish guts work good. Those of you that don't fish, but what we're going to do for my tomato plants, just get a thing of sardines water. Works just as good. In fact, that cherry tomato plant that I'm talking about, I didn't go fish. I just got like 4 things from the Dollar Tree, the cheapest sardines and water, and I just put like 4 cans of that and gave like 2 inches of dirt, and I planted a tomato plant on it, and that's the one that worked all the way to December. So yeah, you love the calcium or the whatever they get out of fish. So it really does work. Peter, correct. The hay is actually decomposing, and there's a chemical process that generates the heat. And that's when they're using a heat source. When I'm in the town that I was born in, Enterprise, Alabama, there was Sessions Peanut Company, and they made peanut butter and peanut oil. And in a peanut, when it's been dried and they're going through the process, they shell it, and there's like a paper skin on the actual nut that's blowed off. And those are collectible. Those are super easy to go through a heat if they get wet. And these would be extracted, taken, and into this big, huge, upside down cone like that outside the factory. And that's where they'd be put. And when I was like 14 or 15, it caught fire. It got a leak in the roof. Water got in a 10-foot deep pile of these husks, and it didn't take 24 hours, and it burst into flames. Well, the fire department comes out, they put the fire out with water. You start the cycle again. And every day about 2 o'clock, that place would burst into flames. It got to where the local fire department just would send a truck out there at 1 o'clock waiting on it. And when the smoke came out, they'd hit it with water. The only way to avoid it was you had to take that out and spread it out over like the size of a football field and keep the heat from having any thermal mass to absorb and dry it out. But it was sort of a waste product. Why are we going to do that? And for like months, it's like every day, fire department over there and was ready for it to burst into flame. They'd wet it down and do it again. Finally, the city said, look, we're not doing this anymore. You've got to either burn it out or shovel it out or do something. And they came in and cleaned it out of those hoppers, put it down the middle of a field out there and spread it out, and kind of let it quit and decompose and everything. But it'll just go through a heat. Just wet, add water, goes through heat, spontaneous combustion. Grandpa, I use salt scrub when it's really, really bad. That's my favorite abrasive to use, to be honest. I will take and wash it. Then when it's still wet, I'll pour the salt in and add just a tiny amount. I want to make a paste. And I use that paste to scrub. And that's usually whenever I've got something that's gone seriously sideways and rust is shut up. And I'm going to re-season. Is I'll use salt, scrub it out, and put water in it, bring to a boil. The salt will dissolve. Pour that out, rinse it out real good, and then start the re-seasoning process. But I prefer to do that than using something like Spick and Span or some scrubbing soap or whatever, because you might as well just sand it down to bare metal and go over, because that soap's going to make it have a taste until you completely get it out of that system. And I'd rather just use something food grade to begin with. Salt, as opposed to, of course, you had animals. We had stock salt, which is a more coarse salt. than the stand table salt, and that was really good for scrubbing that out in a hurry. Camping all out. Thank you very much. Trapper Dad, absolutely. That Master Trapper knife was very interesting. I got to handle one at the Camp Out Mississippi. William was kind enough to bring a lot of the new models out and let me look at them and etc. And of course, now I'm wanting other models, hey. But, I really enjoy getting around with. Hopefully, he's going to be my gathering this year. Jasper, thank you very much, Indiana. Oh, hang tough. What I did was I worked for a military contractor. We were a company that made military and weather radars. So I transported stuff for. There were sometimes I acted as a truck driver most of the time, where I go and actually like assemble the actual device and then get green lights and hand it over to the $50+ an hour engineer who'd sit there with his coffee cup and turn the dials. And then there was times that I'm putting some on board a ship or aircraft carrier or submarine or whatever. Because all I had to do was just plug it in and make sure the wire's hooked up, And so I did get to go around a lot of the military stuff and carry stuff and get on bases and stuff and see a lot of stuff back in the day. But I'm not going to talk about a lot of it on here. So, but thank you for asking. Yeah, that does sound good. Heat water. Here in south where it is so hot. Back in the late 70s, I assisted a man in a small community about 30 minutes from me, and he was building a buried house way above the everybody else. Today they think in them days it was unheard of, but he came in and he created the house, and then he buried it, put dirt all the way around it, so you had like a bunker hole. You came in the front, and he had skylights bringing it in. And he had taken, I think it was 10-inch diameter, it was 8 or 10-inch diameter PC pipe, and made this huge pattern out in the yard, about 6-8 feet deep. That was where he dug fill dirt to bury the house, and then he brought other dirt in to fill that hole in. And he would pump air down there. Well, that ground temperature down there was in the 50s year round, and it also had water. A water pipe that spiraled around inside that pipe. So he would pump probably 50-degree well water through it, and then the ground temperature in the 50s, and so you run the air in it. That's how he had air conditioning. It was 50-degree air. It was 95 degrees outside, but the air coming out of the vents was 50-something degrees. So man, it was beautiful in there. Flip that to the dead of winter whenever it was 35 degrees outside and it was 60-some degrees in the house. Because he would turn off the well water and it would warm it up a little bit, and it would actually, it's sort of a heat exchanger. It works very well. He never had a air conditioner or heat pump, just air going through pipes. Inub, I am in Lower Alabama. At the Alabama, Florida, Georgia corner, near a town called Dothan. Whenever you look at the map, I'm between Dothan and Enterprise in a very small dot road community between the two. Kazan, happy Groundhog Day. Mount Epart. I've had a long debate with friends over a boys axe and a camp axe are the same thing or different. They are basically the same thing. But to me, and as I understood coming up, the difference was the head. If it was a 1 pound head, which basically a hatchet head, that was a boy's axe. And if it was a pound and a half or a 2 pound head, that was a camp axe. And it was the weight of the head, you know. Usually a boy's axe was a limbing axe. And that's what boys' job was. They made kindling and stove wood. So their job is to take, like 2-3 inch limbs and cut them up, split, and that type deal. And so basically, it was just a hatchet with a long handle on it. Whereas the camp axe, a lot of guys carried for actually going out and doing job work, stuff like that. A lot of farmers had a short axe like that. It would be with the wagon, with the mules, or with the tractor, because there'd be times they had to cut something with an axe. There'd be a limb down or something like that, or a fence post that they needed to whack in the ground a little bit better or something like that. And so it was a jack of all trades. And God, I have seen some beat up axes where they had been used beyond what their ideas were, what they were designed for. But it was a working tool. But to me, that's the difference between the boys and the camp. It's the way they did. 6 more weeks. Well, let's see. 4 plus 2, which would be about 2 weeks before my gathering. Hopefully, it'll be about right. Where winter will be over, but it won't be too hot and won't have mosquitoes yet. Grandpa, I understand. The company that was the parent company, the company I worked for, was TXM. They did the cruise missiles out of Pensacola, Florida. You made the Tomahawks. We were doing the cruise. The company I was part of was in the 80s, whenever they were really getting GPS kind of on deck for military, but for everything else. And the company was doing a lot of the tracking systems, guidance systems that were going into the cruises to where they could use GPS. The company I was part of was doing that. And so they could understand weather. You didn't want this super expensive piece of ordnance using up all its fuel to go around the clouds. Tell the difference between a cloud and a mountain. And so we had to teach it how to be a weather station. That's a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Quinn the Eskimo, good evening. Sure, that's correct. With the price of everything going through, a lot of the old technology you're going to see coming back, I'm pretty sure. Because a pellet stove is just a wood stove that's enough refined fuel. Kerosene heaters, you could probably convert a kerosene heater over to biodiesel pretty easily. Thermal mass. There's a reason we go into these really old buildings that the walls were so thick, other than for Indian protection. But you used to go into Westville, which was a place near Columbus, Georgia, and they had 150 old buildings that they had salvaged from all over the South. They'd been built in the 1820s, 1830s, whatever. I think the latest I had was the Civil War era. And I remember one cabin they had there, a dog trot cabin. I went there, it was in the 90s, and you walked in the cabin at 15 degrees cooler. The walls were that thick. And they insulated from the heat, and there were gaps between the floorboard where you could look down and see the ground underneath. So everybody, well, it's shoddy construction. That's not, because in the heat rises, that would cool from underneath the house up into the house. In the winter, they'd cover the floors to stop that draft. But in the summertime, the heat draft like a chimney. And the seats were way high and peaked to focus and draw that up to act like a chimney and suck out the heat. And those houses weren't built for air conditioning, and they were cooler. Yep, they were hotter than our modern ones, but they were cooler than the ambient temperature outside. And they knew what they were doing back in them days. I think a lot of that technology that we kind of ran past with modernization If we went back and re-looked at it from a modern eye with our modern ability to manufacture and stuff, we'll find a lot of stuff there. Just a little Leno's garage. We was talking about steam cars, and that one of the cars he talked about was built like 1928, very end of the steam car. And he said it takes about 8 minutes for it to warm up, and it'll run any road speed you want. And he said you could probably drive it coast to coast for a couple of propane cylinders to act as the fuel source to run the furnace, and the water it recycles, reclaims, and reuses. He said you could probably run coast to coast for about $40 worth of propane to be the heat source, and probably 10 gallons of water, and running 60, 70 miles an hour. So it'll run fast, easy. And this was 1929 steam technology. If you took and modernized that with our computer controlled and our et ceteras, who knows where we go? Somebody's going to try and look at the old stuff and go, hey, wait a minute, what was this? If I know where Gab's Gunnersville is. Carl Knives, good evening. Good. As far as taxes are great. Okay. Hang tough. So you get to take one weapon, a Glock, a 12 gauge, or an AR. If we are talking about a survival scenario, 12 gauge. The Glock is a very fine gun, but you're going to have to find ammunition, and that can be a little bit of a challenge. Plus, you can make your own lead bullets and all like that, etc. The 12 gauge has the biggest variety of possibility from small game all the way up to heavy stuff, and is absolutely devastating up close. The AR is better for long range. All three of those in the combination is pretty well rounded out for most problems and opportunities. But if I had to pick one of those for survive with, it'd be the 12 gauge, which I'd actually really prefer a 20 long rifle, but that's from the old days when you were feeding family. Brutus, good evening. Garen, I like the S-wing axes because of the chance of missing a post ahead and hitting with the shaft. Those metal shafts do have that advantage. However, I would stay away from the antique ones because they didn't have the shock absorbing ability of the modern ones. Inside the handle of the modern ones, they figured out the tuning fork method that reduces a lot of that felt shock. And that was one of the reasons the S-wings were great, was you couldn't break heads off of them. It was also bad because you felt more shock on your wrist, and it would wear your hands out, wear you out using them. That's the reason professional loggers and stuff didn't go to them, because it would just wear you out. But the modern ones that's been made in the last, say, 20 years, yeah, would be really good choice for that, especially for somebody that doesn't have a lot of experience. Yeah, be a good choice. Sal, good evening. Sure. I don't know exactly where Bertha is. If it's in them small communities, there's a lot of them down here. I have lived in this county my whole life. I can probably off the top of my head name 20 or 25 little communities, and I know there's 53. I don't know where half of these places are at, and I've lived here my whole life. And we got some colorful names down here. So 2 Egg and Arab, and they're, all kinds of places. And nite, it's just a spot in the road. Peter, is it true that canning came about? Yeah. Napoleon had to take champagne bottles and bottle a instant soup. It was a really thick concentrate that they would put in these bottles, and then they would be able to uncork and use that to make a big pot of soup that they could add whatever they could find a field into, have some food value. From that, as I understand it, they got around to taking lead soldered tins and doing that. Tins had been around for quite a while, and they would just stuff in it and solder it closed. Of course, lead solder contaminated it. But somewhere in that area, you're talking about late 1890s in isolated areas and early to 1820s, and it really popped up. And then later on, it became more fashionable and more available, and really worked out better. By the Civil War, canning was common, and even some of the troops were being issued some things in cans, instead of barrels. It'd be issued in cans or some sort of sealed up. Gordon, would ranger beads be more accurate using a rangefinder over a pace count? Also, do you think it would be more reliable? It would be more accurate, but no, it would not be more reliable. The whole idea of the range bead is really an average, of so many steps. But if you were going to be walking on a track and field oval, oh, absolutely, the rangefinder would be 10 times more accurate. But you're not walking on nice flat terrain. You felt better today. You stretched out a little further. You don't feel as good today. You're wearing a little more weight, whatever. And so your steps are going to vary widely. And so it's an average. It's just to give you a good idea of the depth. And so I really prefer the ranger beads, to get what it is. Just tell you, okay, you should be about now. Start looking for this creek, this ridge, this turn, this break, this saddle, whatever. And you usually be a little short of it, which is the best way to be. If I work out that my distance is supposed to be 2 clicks, at 1.5 clicks, I start looking. Because if I ran a little over, then I'll find it quick. If I ran a little short, I'll find it here in a minute. And it's always better to come up short and know it's in front of you as go past it, then you're looking and it's back yonder. And so to me, for pace counting, that's what the reason the military stayed with it and teaching is to do the pace count. There was a push for special forces in the late 60s for a different way to do that with triangulation. To get people to targets and stuff like that more secure. And they just found it did not work out that practical in the field, that the old beads work better. And so, yes, if you're doing a precision something, absolutely rangefinder is better. But like in my woods, you can't see 20 feet when you're in the real stuff. There is no shoot 3 miles across there and figure out. If you're out west, yeah, you can do that easily. But in my thick cover, unless you're in a road, you're looking right here in front of you. And so it really has to, and then you got to dodge through all these obstacles, over this, under that, duck around here. And so you're never walking in a straight line. You're constantly having to recorrect. And so that's where the ranger beads gives you a real advantage in that kind of broken, chaotic situation. Less accurate is actually giving you a better working knowledge. At least in my opinion, in my experience. Hello, the forest gnome, Mr. Pink. How you doing tonight, sir? Enid, correct. An attic fan can be a great asset. I've got a friend's house right now. The house was built in the 40s, and it has central heat and air. And most of the time, they just run the attic fan. They will kick on that attic fan at night, and it'll suck all the heat out of the house, crack the windows. Of course, they got good screens. And then when they get up in the morning, about 5:30 or 6, close all the windows, but leave the fan on. And that'll suck it up from under the house through the floors. And it's only in like July and August they have to kick on that air. Besides that, it'll be, say 580, maybe 85 in there. But it's distinctly cooler, 20 degrees or so cooler than the outside air, just using that fan and the way the house is built. Forrest Gnome, awesome. Glad you got the phone figured out. Sports Mobile 83, correct. Stanley steamer cars. Put those into modern technology, might be something for the future. Sports Mobile, a 22-410. My wife, when we got married, she had a 22-410. The old Stevens brake barrel. Great gun for all kinds of uses. Mike Bolton, that's very good. FEMA actually did good research on that. And I have talked to people that have gone through that building such things. I have not done it. I have seen pellet stoves and have seen those type of burning materials that FEMA is talking about, even the waste oil burners that do a good job. So it can be done. A better way to heat the house, you know. For a switch, if you're going into Canada and they're not going to allow you to bring a handgun, not I would just a shotgun. And something for making noise, like I said, bells, stuff like that. Don't be afraid to talk. Most of these big animals like that have a natural fear of man. And so the opposite of the game is to make noise. If you think you got something there, start talking. You know, I had somebody that was on the Alone show that was one of my subscribers, and me and him were talking back and forth. And he had had a problem with bears. And he had said that what would I have done differently? I said, I yelled a couple of times a day. I'd have got out there and reared back and just boom it just as loud as you can. I want every animal around here to know there's a human over here. And for the most part, that should kind of spook them off, because most of them, if you're acting scared and backing away, that can trigger their predator response. On the other hand, if you're like, hey, you're a bear, you know, and you go toward it a little bit, don't run at it, don't be stupid, but you seem unafraid of it and seem a little bit aggressive, a little, you will do out better, you know. Be expecting him to put on a show, be expecting him to either turn, walk away, or bluff. If he don't bluff and he's going to come after you, a 12 gauge is your best bet. Load that sucker with bucking ball and slug alternating, and practice with it ahead of time would be my recommendation. Hang tough. Right now I've got a silky saw. Cheddar. The only thing you have to use steel shot on is birds, migratory birds like duck, goose, things like that. Lead shot is still used on everything else, so you'll be perfectly fine with that for rabbits, squirrels, etc. They went to the steel ones because you went to certain places in New England, like Connecticut and stuff like that, where people have been hunting on this pond for ducks for 200 years with lead shot. You can go out there in the mud and pull up handfuls, and you start doing like that, and you got lead shot in your hand. And so the ducks were eating it and off the bottom and killing ducks. And so they went to steel so it would dissolve. But that's about the only thing it's really needed for is waterfowl, things like that. So lead shots used in everything else. So rabbits, squirrels, and all, lead is perfectly fine. De-gimlet. Exactly. I know y'all in Canada have got a real problem up there right now with firearms. If I can't have a firearm, I'm going to have one heck of a noise maker. Get one of them cans with a thing, loud as you can get, you know. And then ask the question, can I carry a crossbow? You know, something. How about a nice spear? At least it'll give you something to do while it's chewing on you. You know what I mean? Gordon, I have heard of the Stevens 20 gauge 22 Magnum, but I've not seen. Oh, I've not held, shot or owned one, I should say. My wife had the 22 410. Excuse me. I think hers was actually the 20 gauge, but I haven't actually owned or had one of the 22 Magnums. I thought that'd be perfect for the setup. Wow. Didn't know that. They're poisoning trees. Okay. I know a lot of people not a lot, quite a few people that have lived up in Alaska, and they've talked to me about encountering bear. Most of the time they'd leave you alone. As long as they knew you were there, they'd go around you or whatever. There's a couple times they did get in trouble, and they had to stand their ground or whatever. But their thing down here when they got into my swamps was alligators. Like, wow, you in some place with these dinosaurs walking around here? And I go, kind of like your bears. They'll leave you alone as long as you acknowledge them, let them know you're there, and unless you're dumb enough to be swimming in deep water with them, they'll, for the most part, leave you alone unless it's breeding season and it's a mama protecting her babies. Besides that, they'll pretty much leave you alone. And people, most animals, for the most part, across the board, they'll leave you alone. The whole idea is just be prepared for when they don't. My granddaddy, we didn't have black bear around here when I was young, and now we do. In fact, just a few miles from me the other night, there was a pretty good size and probably about 300 pounds was walking around in a little community down there, and people's, cameras outside, security cameras, caught him walking around their yards and stuff. So they're coming back in a lot, and they're over in the Conecuh National, and they're down in North Florida, and they're coming back up the river system back into this park. But my granddaddy, his granddaddy, remember when there was bears, he said that 99 out of 100 bears will run from it, but they don't come in that order. So, always expect, is this the one that's going to turn to run around? And we see a lot of game camera footage down here, people, especially down in North Florida and stuff, where these bears are aware of humans, very aware of humans, and they're skirting around the communities and stuff, trying to stay out of harm's way. But somebody would be up in a deer stand, 20, 25, 30 foot up a tree, and the bear would climb the tree to get up there and just look at him. The guy sitting there on the camera, looking at the bear like 2 feet below his feet. There was one that I saw last year. This bear comes barreling in and came boiling up that tree. And the guy was bow hunting, and he was so flabbergasted. He was looking this way. The camera could see, but he was looking this way. By the time he realized that bear was coming up that tree, he was 3/4 way to him. And he just froze, and the bear stopped with his head like this far away from him, and just sat breathing, looking around. The guy just sat still as a post. And finally, the bear climbed back down the tree, and just about the time he got 10 or 12 feet out, this bigger bear blew out of the woods and went chasing him. That bear was running from a bear. He came up here to get away from him, So I thought that was cool. He was not trying to get you. He was trying to get away from that bear. So, well, that would be a brown moment in the Cruise the Loon, wouldn't it? Have a 300-pound black bear coming up that tree at high speed at you. Woo! You don't have a story to tell. Gunsmith. Yeah, California has their own rules. Hang tough. Where did your family come from, USA? My grandfather's family was originally Mac Thomas, and they were some of the early Highlanders that were brought in to form the colony of Georgia in 1730s. and they were indentured, which means they were sold into slavery, and were there for about 8 or 10 years, and they moved out of Georgia into lower Alabama, into what was then the Indian Nation. There was no state of Alabama. It was the Indian Nation, the Creek Nation, and married in and lived down here and became traders. And so as far as we can figure out, my family's been in this part of the South, somewhere in this triangle of the South, since the 1730s. Now, my grandmother's people were Indian. They were Cherokee. So they'd been here a whole lot longer. So that's as far as I go back on that one. I traced my family lineage all the way back into Scotland, and apparently the Mac Thomases were some of the ones that helped create the Black Angus cattle. They took French cattle and Scottish cattle and crossed them way back yonder. And so Black Angus cattle came from early part of my family. But that's how I got here. So it's Scottish and Indian and a mix of just everything. There's 3 distinct bands of Thomases down here. So my last name's Thomas. The ones that's got these, Neanderthal, Cro-Magnon ridge on us, the broad fingernails, Indian half. And then there's some that are blonde-haired, and those were ones that married into Germans right after the Civil War. And then there's some that's a little, I wouldn't say kind of rounder faced, and they brought wives back from Mexico, from the Mexican American War. And so there's 3 distinct bands down here that you can look at us and tell which part of the family you're from. But that's enough about my history and family. Sure, I hear you. Yeah, you always take somebody slower than you when you go bear hunting. Grandpa, you about a bear getting in a bus and couldn't get out. I know of a bear that climbed into an 18-wheeler. The guy pulled into a parking area and a truck stop and went in to get something to eat. And he was in the shower, etc., bunkhouse in there. And he left his rig running, because it was in the winter. And he came out about 3 hours later, and the passenger door had been just tore off, and the bear was in the sleeper. He just ripped open the door and climbed in the sleeper and ate a whole big old box of chocolates, kisses he had back there, and he went to sleep. So he got a running rig with a grizzly sitting in the sleeper. I bet that was a touchy situation. Yeah, I've heard that one to Gimlin about. You can tell the scat and the bear where kind of was. Art by Chels. Art by Chels. Is that you, Chelsea? Okay, everybody. Art with Chels. That's Chelsea Scott, the lady that was in my videos. That's her on. Eli, when will the Always with Cast Iron? That will be shot next week. Bear is on a rotating schedule, and so he will be off next Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and we're going to get together, and that's going to be an in-depth, because we're going to actually take, like I said at this last one, we're going to be taking cast iron that we've got a supply of cast iron that's come out of an estate that's rusty and needs to be gone through. And so I'm going to be doing salt scrub and getting rid of rust and stuff like that. And we'll show that, how I'm going to go through those processes. And then he's going to be burning out the ones that's got stuff in it that just needs to be burned out. And it's going to be set on the fire, burned out, and we're going to go through the seasoning process. And so that's probably going to be a long video, because we're going to show everything, all of our steps that we're doing it and why we're doing it. So it is coming, and that'll be Always number 23, I think it is. 22, 23, whatever it is. Cheddar, have I ever eaten bear meat? I have, but it was not greasy what I had. It was actually pretty good. It was black bear, and I liked it. If you've ever eaten coon, you know what greasy is, but it wasn't anything like that. It was moist, but it was not greasy, not what I had. Gray Wolf, a lot of those Chinese cast irons, like you get in the camping section at Walmart, yeah, they are so coarse that you really need to sand them down. Yeah, you could just build up enough over time, enough seasoning to smooth it out. But that's so coarse. It would really be better to sand the flat bottom. Just go ahead and sand it, and then season it. I would like a 3-inch puck, about that big a diameter puck of half-inch thick plywood, countersink a bolt through it nut on the top so it's flush on the bottom, and then hook a drill to it and put like 60 grit adhesive sandpaper on there. Take the skillet, lock it down where it's not going to take off, and put that thing in there flat and just kind of do it like a router and go around a couple times and knock that down so it's kind of smooth. You ain't got to go to it perfectly smooth. In fact, it wouldn't be as good perfectly smooth. But once I got that down, go to a jig sander where I can get like a crosshatch and put like 250 or something like that, 200 grit sandpaper on it, and do like that. And I wouldn't go beyond like a 300 grit for a finish, and that'd be just real quick to take any high sharp points off, and then clean that real good and season it, and that should do good. But those Chinese, they are so coarse. Where the Lodge, American made Lodge, not. It's always smoother. But those Chinese are definitely need a little bit of smoothing out. They work fine for camping, but for keeping it at the house, use them a lot, yeah. Hang tub. You ever had an alien encounter down there out in the woods? I have not ever had an alien encounter, but I did encounter something that me and a group of friends couldn't explain what we're looking at, and we didn't know what it was for nearly a year and a half. But long story, we were going down to a favorite place to go to on the river, and when we came in, there was these lights. I mean, super bright lights, where this road meanders like that coming in. You can see the light coming through the trees. I'm talking about it's like a football stadium lights. You know what I mean? You tree limb up there and you see the shadow because the light's so intense on both sides. You can see a shadow. And we were wondering, like, what is going on down here? And then we went that last turn. We came in, nothing. Just nothing. And that was really weird. And we spent a little time down there, and then we saw this red light, really weak, up about tree line, about 150 yards out. And so we left. And when you left and got up on the ridge, from that point to there is probably about 1.5 miles. As we're climbing up that ridge, we saw this light come straight up out of the thing and was shining on us. And it was so bright that 1.5 miles away, when I held up my hand, it made a shadow on the truck. It was that bright. And it just sat there. Now, I live where we have a major helicopter base right here at Rooker. So I'm used to rotary aircraft. We could hear nothing. Dead silence. And then we finally went to crank up. It just went and just dropped like a rock back down in the tree line. And then the light went out. Didn't know what that was. About 3 years later, they finally admitted it was a new drone that the military was testing for observation. And they're over the river on the other side. There's a subfield for the aircraft to land, touch and go on. A shell field, not shell field, a satellite thing. And they were out there testing that thing. They knew that was a favorite parking and camping area down there at the river, so they was going to just sit there and look for the teenagers trying to make out and stuff like that. And because it's a stealth thing, and it was a little bit bigger than a trash can, had all kinds of stuff on, and it was early drone, but we didn't know what that was. Alien, no. UFO, well, yes, it's unidentified flying object. Did I think it came from outside the world? No. But what was it? And finally they showed it. It was called the Sarge A3R or whatever, and it was an early drone that could be controlled, and they were trying out. Gordon, yeah, turn in for that cast iron video. We'll, like I said, it will post on a Sunday, and it'll probably be, hopefully it'll be next Sunday, because Wednesday's when we'd get together to do the video, and I'll post on Sunday. So hopefully next Sunday. The bear is just like a good roast when prepared right. I've known a lot of people that's ate quite a few bear and have talked about it. It tastes very much like roast, and that it's usually very tender and juicy. Jeff, how do we sign up for your get together in March? Just show up. Come on. I will post video close, but it's at Geneva State Forest Lake, not Geneva County Lake, someplace else. Geneva State Forest Lake is where it is, and it'll be the 23rd through the 26th. I'll be there on the 23rd, and that's from a Thursday, I believe it is, through a Sunday, 4 days. I may be there earlier if somebody shows up early, like Miss Pam and them. I don't know. We'll always play that by ear. But that's my plan to be there. And it's just informal, show up. It's a big, long lake. There's a big camping area. There's room for RVs, no hookups. There's no water on the site other than the lake. So if you want to bring a filtration thing, that's great. Firewood, I pay for firewood to be brought out there for us, so we got some firewood. But there are concrete tables along the edge of the lake, and then there's trash cans along the end of the lake, and the state provides 2 porta potties out there. And so that's, yeah, you get in and out of it fairly easily. It's a fairly well maintained road, but it's about depending on which way you come. If you come the long way in, it's 4 miles on dirt road, which, like I said, is a fairly well-maintained road. In other words, I think it's like 3 miles up from a paved road, but either way. Sportsman 83, I think a lot of the old Winchester 22 Magnum, the old Winchester WRF, not the 22 Magnum, but the earlier one, correct? If you're talking about that earlier one, they were very good. Just hard to find ammo. I understand they do a run every so often for that. And that is not standard 22 Winchester Magnum Day. It's the old Magnum. And it came out, it didn't do that well, and it kind of died off. And then in the 1950s, it came back. And the funny reason that they brought back 22 Magnum was for shooting bears and mountain lions out of trees, because it was really popular in the 1950s for the dog hunts in places where it was legal to do such things. And they were going after black bear, and they were going after mountain lion or bobcat with dogs. And you're paid a lot of money for this hunt. You get in here, and he's only 30 feet up in that tree, or 20 feet up in that tree. And you're going to have him mounted. If you shoot him with 30-06, it's going to blow a big hole. And that's going to cost extra to mount. 22 may or may not, depending on various factors, and if you didn't get a good hit. And suddenly the old antique 22s came out. Still had ammo for them, and it was such a big outcry for it. Winchester went and made the modern 22 Magnum because of that. And when I tell people it was for shooting mountain lions and bears out of trees, it was what reason they brought it back. Double the horsepower of a standard 22 long rifle. Very effective. Justin, good evening. Glad you woke up. Corn Pops, thank you very much. I don't recall ever eating bear ribs, but I've heard a lot of people bragging on them. So, Cloud Talker, hello, welcome to the live. I do these usually every Thursday night, 7 p.m. Central. Any questions or whatever, just throw them in there. I'll be glad to answer what I can. Oh, yeah, gray wolf, yeah. After they've been feeding on the garbage, yeah, any kind of scavenger hunter's the same way. A lot of people like to live catch possums and put them in a pen and feed them cat food for a week or two to kind of clean them out, because to get some of that taste out of them, because they're eating a lot of carrion in the summer and early fall. And so it's a good thing to do to kind of clean them out. Hang tough. We've actually thought about doing that, of him interviewing me for his channel, and he's got his channel up. We're just working out some little finite details right now, and he's, as soon as he gets the content rolling and etc., we're probably going to be doing stuff like that. SDR 22630. How do you put out a campfire when you have limited or no water? First thing I do is I spread the fire out, bring the coals and everything out, spread it out, break the heat. Fire works on the triangle of oxygen, heat, fuel. If I pull it out where it loses heat, fire goes away very quickly. Let that, maybe even 20, 30 minutes, do it like that, and then bury it, because I deprive it of oxygen. If I've deprived it of the heat and it's gone down to smoldering pieces, I will then deprive it of heat, dig a hole, put it into it, completely bury it, stomp on that sucker, make it hard packed earth, and make sure it's cleared over it. Now it's going to sit there and radiate heat for a time. But if I have no access to water and I'm kind of pressed for time and I got to get rid of this fire, that's how I do it. And of course, clear out an area 10 foot across before you ever start building the fire. So hopefully, if it does, it doesn't have a problem. Now, I don't live in the parts of the country where you have peat moss and ground fires. We don't have that down here. So what I've just said cannot apply to those situations where you can dig down and bury it, but there is enough oxygen and enough fuel in thin veins of peat for that to cascade and cause a fire somewhere else. So you've just got to be aware of where you're at. If I had no other choice, the campfire from the night before I cooked my breakfast on, I'm going to spread that sucker out and just let it smother itself out while I'm breaking down my camp and everything else, to try to keep that happening if I cannot bury it for whatever reason. Jet, oh yeah, we got plenty of trees for hammocks. Cloud Talker, you're welcome. Justin, possums make good pets. They're actually about as intelligent as a cat, and they're actually a very affectionate animal. And for a long time, I wanted a baby possum to raise one, but not anymore. We got cats, but the cats would lose their mind if you came in with a full-size possum. They wouldn't know what to do with them things. Someone do that. They got mouth open, hissing at them. Oh, yeah. CJ, I have in the past talked to a couple of different schools that wanted me to come and work with their program. In fact, I was asked by Madison Poole and Jay Hercules, there's going to be an event put on in West Virginia in September, and they wanted to know if I'd be willing to come up to a class up there. I'm kind of on the fence on it right now. I like and respect them. That's not it. It's just the distance and time. And I have, even Bear's got the land. We'd even thought about doing a school down here because he's got 1,000+ acres available to do a school. And so we have thought about it, but at this time we have not done that yet. Have I been an instructor in other capacities? Yes. I was a shooting sports director for Boy Scouts of America I've taught people in all kinds of different things. In fact, my degree I was going for in college was to be a teacher. So I've even took over college classes before and been a guest instructor. So I've thought about it, but we just haven't got into it yet. Oh yeah, great. That old one where you had to have shovel, dirt, and water anytime you had a fire. Use what works. You tent camp, hammock camp, whatever works for you. If it makes you comfortable, go with it. And now we will see. Message coming in. Here we go. Okay, back to Cheddar, your county extension office. Contact them. They will usually free of charge test your well water and stuff like that. If you've got any kind of contaminants or whatever in it, depending on where you're at. There's a lot of fracking and stuff like that that's caused problems. But as I understand it, any county co-op's office will do that stuff. They'll test your soil. They'll test water samples, things like that. I would look up whatever state you're in, whatever county you're in. Just put that in like Alabama Dale County Co-op Service, and it should take you straight to it and be able to find out what you got to do. Usually they have kits they give you, so you put your water sample, your soil samples, and stuff like that, and send it to them. And I know in Alabama, in most places, it's supposed to be free of charge, just for that type of stuff to keep something bad happening, where somebody would tap a well and a bunch of people get sick. It'd be better to just go ahead and test it. Hang tough. Do you think in our lifetimes we will see a World War III breakout? I will be honest with you. Studying a lot of the things that I study way beyond bushcraft and everything else. Do I think that there could be such a thing? I don't know that there could be because of the demographics. And I'm not going to put this into political discussion, but Russia has just called up their second run of draft. They only got 3 in this little war they're at. They don't have enough 20-something-year-old people to fight a war. Most of the countries of Europe don't have enough 20-something-year-old people to fight a war. And so globally, most of the armies of the world are putting on a pretty good show, but at the same time, they don't have the resources to fight such a war. And so you are a better chance today of such a war not occurring for an economic reason than you would have for a war occurring for some sort of territorial dispute or whatever. Because, I mean, right now, is it 60 countries are sending equipment, whatever, and stuff to Ukraine to fight Russia? 60 countries. They don't want to come and fight. They'll send tanks, though. And so it's just not what the world was at, these mass booming populations and industrialization that caused World War I, and then take 2, World War II. Those factors just don't exist too much now. So could we have nuclear exchanges? Absolutely. They could be whatever. But the mass scale like we saw in those eras, I don't think so. We don't have the young people to do that anymore. It's just one of them. Ain't got no kids to play with. You know, sad, true. Corn Pops, thank you very much. Antonio, okay, you got a black powder revolver, but the hammer won't cock and the cylinder won't spin. I don't know if it has the right cylinder or not. What to do? Okay, Number one, if it's one like Colt's 3 pieces, knock the wedge out and pull the barrel off. Pull the cylinder off. Will it cock now? If it will cock now, it means that the bolt that pops up and locks the cylinder is broke, because you're starting to come back and it's not letting go. If that bolt, the little split legs that look like plow handles on a time horse plow, one of them hooks the hammer, and that's what teeter-totters. If that's broke off inside, the hammer can't cock because the bolt don't drop. That can lock it up. So I would check that. If it will cock then, because the cylinder's out of the way, it's a bad bolt. If it will, you can point it downhill and it'll cock, point it uphill and it'll cock. That's either a broke hand spring. That means that the hand is not hitting the top of the frame rather than falling out and turning the cylinder. Or it is a broke trigger spring that's not allowing, again, that teeter-tottering to happen. So those are usually the thing. Only just take the gun completely apart and you'll find something broke. And Taylor and Company has really good parts, and they have exploded diagrams where you can look and figure out what the part is, and it'll tell you what to order to replace it with. 90% of parts you order will drop right in and work right out of the thing in some degree. It may need a little fine tuning, but 90% of them will drop in and work out of the box. Hope that helps. Back to sleep in my tent, but bring a small hammock to lounge around the campsite. Absolutely. A lot of times at my event, I'm in some big elaborate setup over here, and I'll go over yonder with a little point that goes out near the water. I'll go out, hang up my hammock, and take a nap. It's just comfortable that way. County Agriculture Extension Agent instead of Farmers Co-op. You are correct, Justin. For the gentleman that was asking about testing their water and everything. County Agricultural Extension Agent. There you go. Gordon Dixon, can you shoot slugs out of a muzzleloading 12 gauge? Yes, as long as that does not have a choke, or it's a modified or cylinder. A full choke, not a good idea. I will be shooting the big round ball out of my muzzleloading 12 gauge in the part 2 that's coming. I will not be shooting the lease slugs, and I'll talk about that in the video. I don't think they're a great choice. James Singer, good evening in South Carolina. Sorry, guys. Got a friend that has had a death in the family and just wanted to talk to me a second. So sorry. Yeah, if you'll go to my percussion revolver series, I go in depth with a lot of guns and do troubleshooting and talk about how to replace and how to fix and what to look for. Go through that, and if you don't find an answer, get a hold of me. Easy way to get a hold of me is on Facebook. I'm Blackie Thomas on Facebook. Just send me a question, and I'll be glad to do what I can to help you. Peter, hello. Michelangelo, good evening to Ohio. Jeff, we can ramp up our military production, but that's the thing. If we ramp up our military production to World War I standards, just about the rest of the time it comes to a dead stop. I mean, you convert factories over, you convert everything. And yeah, we could do that kind of stuff. That's what made us such a power in World War II, was we could outperform anybody. We could make more than anybody. But in today's modern world, you can win a war and then lose everything because your economy's completely collapsed. So it's one of the, like I said, the world is a different world now. And we don't have the young people to fight the wars like we did. We're too interconnected than we were back then. And so going to that kind of full out and out war, I don't know if we'll have it for 500 years. Could there be a nuclear war? Yes, but I don't think there'll be that kind of mass. Everybody's going, because none of these nations, Europe was the best for this. That went all the way back to the feudal kingdoms. And they're kind of not in that position anymore. Most of them, the United States Marine Corps is a better fighting force than 80% of the NATO country. Could outdo them in a 1-to-1, just the Marine Corps. Forget the rest of the military. And so it's too expensive to run those kind of armies. You destroy everything else doing it. Sage, yes, I've got an American Speedy Stitcher that was made in, I think, Ohio or something like that. Even still got the little box that came in. And I do use them from time to time. It's great for mending gear. And if I'm going on a long expedition, we're going to be in the field for quite a while. Usually that's tucked in the pocket, because if a strap breaks on a pack or something like that, it's quick and easy to take the thing and stitch and repair and keep it in the field, as opposed to, what the alternative is, trying to hand sew through leather, which sucks, or heavy pack straps or whatever. Gray Wolf, I have seen stuff out of Russia that were those type of slugs like you're talking about. Those, you still find them sometimes on eBay and stuff, and sometimes those moles were like $200 or $300 a piece. But they do make such things. Sorry, guys. But okay, let's see. How long did meat last when you salted it? How was the other ways to preserve meat in colonial times? They used either tallow, they used fat, and they used salt. Salt would, pork would last up to 2 years. Salt beef lasted up to a year, as I understand it from those days. And if you just salted meat, you're just killing the bacteria on the surface of it. It was better to brine it and then take it out, salt it. But even then, it kind of desiccated the meat. You had to boil it and get all that extra salt out. Otherwise, you just didn't want to eat it. But it could make it last longer. How long is longer would depend on the meat, your heat, your temperature, and etc. Oftentimes, it was just better to go ahead and turn it into jerky or something like that, because you boil jerky would rehydrate and be able to use it. Hang tough. I agree that we need to document these skills. We need to pass on these skills, because things could go bad. And if it did, it'd go bad real quick. Yep. That yellow and green. Yeah. Where it was patented in what, the 20s or something like that. I picked it up at a hardware store. God, when I was 15, 16, I still got it. I stored it. It's over yonder in one of the boxes. Yeah, Justin, you can smoke meat as well. That was a way to preserve meat, was smoking them. Takes time, but it does work. And a big old Virginia ham that's been smoked all winter. Ooh. Oh, yeah. Thin little slices of it with cheese and homemade yeast rolls. Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's one of the reasons they used to have to padlock smokehouses, too, because you'd do all the work and suddenly your neighbors wanted to borrow some because they knew how much work it was. Chris, yeah, it will make you hungry thinking about them. My favorite meal is a ham steak, about that big, about as thick as your pinky, with mashed potatoes and field peas and butter beans mixed with homemade brown gravy and yeast rolls and sweet tea. That's my all-time favorite meal. And when I'd go over to my mama's house, even whenever I was an adult, me and my wife would go over to visit on a Sunday or whatever. That's what she'd cook for me. It's one of the few things she cooked that I really, really liked. Mama was a good person, but she wasn't a great cook. But that was one thing she could cook that I really enjoyed. Hang tough. What was your first car? I am ashamed to say that my first car was a Ford Granada. I've only owned one Ford in my life, and that was it. And what was my second car was a Chevy Camaro, much better car. We got about 20 minutes left to go, guys. Anybody got a question they want to throw at me? And Chelsea, if you're still on, has a portrait coming. Chelsea is an artist as well as being a internet celebrity, so to speak, on Blackie's channel. So she actually is a very good artist drawing. First rifle. Now, there's a good question. My first rifle was a Remington Scoremaster bolt action 22 with I think it was an 8-round clip in it that I had got off of an uncle. I cut yard all summer to get that rifle. Yes, James, I got my Kerr mold in, I cast bullets, and I'm very, very happy with it. My 1860 loves it, and my Dragoon, I'm going to be doing a head-to-head next week where I've got the Rogers and Spencer and the Dragoon using the exact same paper cartridge with a Kerr bullet like it was done in the store, 35 grains in that, and they'll both fit into both guns. It's a full load in the Dragoon, it's a full load in the Rogers and Spencer. And I'm going to be doing a head-to-head shoot on that, see which one gives me better accuracy. But I'm very happy with that. The weight forward of it, better balance of it, seems to just be more accurate to me. Gordon, Chevy Novas, they're nice. Especially when they're done right. Man, they're great little sleepers. That little shoebox coming at you at high speed, they go. David Bush, do you think that ex-cons should have their God-given rights restored after paying their debt to society? That would be on a case-by-case basis, depending on what took place and how and why. Blanket statement, for me, I don't think it should apply across the board. I think it should be a case-by-case. It's different from someone who, in the heat of the moment, did something versus somebody that was cold, premeditated, or did it for money or whatever. And of course, was it a 15-year-old that his girlfriend left him and he did something stupid? Or was this someone that was cold and calculating and knew? Again, you just have to do it. I hate blanket statements because there's always going to be. I was on a debate team, guys, in college. And for every point, you had to come up with a counterpoint. You never want to do this. Oh, but in this case, there's always another side. And so there's three sides, your side, my side, truth. So blanket statements are that way. I prefer not to do them because of that. Justin, yes, you can fire a slug in a modified. I wouldn't make a diet of it, but it won't hurt the gun. the modified will open up enough to let it out. Full choke, no. It will technically fire out of a full choke, but it is overstressing it and the barrel will open up and you'll end up with a modified after a while. So modified or cylinder or improved cylinder is for slug. And as long as you're not going to shoot 5,000 of them, you should be just fine. Hang tough. What channels do I watch on YouTube? Oh boy. I'll do a list. I'll do a shout out video. I'll try to, in fact, I'll mark that down right now. Do a shout out video. And I will do a list of videos that I'm subscribed to, channels that I'm subscribed to and what I watch. Just take too long for me to go through it right now, but I'll do that. A nite muzzleloading 50 cal. Interesting. They were actually decent guns. Terrence Cord, hello. My Jet Model 61 pump. Yep. I had a pump, Winchester, and then I had the Rossi. It was actually pretty good back in the 80s. There was a good copy of it, and it was a great little, rabbit, bunny, squirrel gun. Great. Gray Wolf, correct. In debate, you have to be able to argue for and against any topic with equal enthusiasm. And the team that I was part of for a short time at a college, those people get hired by special interest groups to go to Washington and try to talk legislators over to their side. And so you had to be able to argue passionately about something you could care less about in real life. But you had to, it was the most important thing in the world for something that turned your stomach, but you would argue for it because that's what you were done for. In fact, the group I was part of, for you to come to the college and interview us, you had to be offering $100,000 a year job, or they wouldn't, the college wouldn't let you even talk to us because they knew what they had. And people that want to come in and try to snipe them, they'd put you out of the program, So it's one of those things. I was in Phi Theta Kappa, I was in Scholar Bowl, and I ended up for a short amount of time working with the debate team, but never went that way. CJ, no, it is not. The Richmond is only in 36. And I've got Richmond bullets, but I'll be honest with you, it's a lot of wear and tear on a gun. It does make a very wide groove for the rifling to engage, actually good, but it's a lot of strain on the loading lever. It's got to be made out of dead soft lead. Even then, it's very difficult to load. And I've kind of got away from them for that reason. Yes, they give me the accuracy, but they're just so hard to load. Now, in the 44 caliber, like Remington, I'd recommend the curve bullet. I've got the Johnson die. I really like it, and that was one of my favorites until I went shooting this Kerr, and it's outclassed that Johnson. Get a curve bullet. It works much better. It should, Mr. Mojo. That's one of the reasons that Mark Cubs did that, was it will fit onto them easily, even the 44s. That's a 51 Navy, which they didn't open up the door. It's a 44, but they left it kind of like the 36 opening. And it seems to fit. I do not have a 44-51, but I can tell you that unmodified is dropped even into my Remington, which has a very small opening as well. Yeah. James, well, welcome to the, I do most Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Play a newbie? Hello. Sorry for asking about modern guns. Do you prefer AK or AR platform? If you're looking for absolute reliability, AK. If you're looking for accuracy, AR. And I did custom guns and I built AR platforms for long range use and etc. for quite a while as a private gunsmith type deal. Everybody brags on the reliability of the AK, and well deserved. Nobody brags about the accuracy though. On the other hand, the AR is more finicky of the two. They've kind of worked out a lot of those details. So depends. If I was going to pick up one right now, it'd be an AR. Parts are available, ammo's available, the accessories are just plentiful. And so it'd be a better chance to find that ammo than it would be 6.239 or even the AK556. Finding a match for that would be kind of tough. So I would go with an AR platform. Oh yeah, great. I know what you're talking about. Had that down there at the front. Oh boy. Oh man, I know the gun you're talking about. I can see it. Maybe I don't remember the model number on that. If you could go back in time and live in a certain era, what would you choose? That's a good question. If I could step back in time and live my life again in any era, that is a good question because 1870s, westward expansion, a lot of opportunity to stake a claim and build up something. And I like the guns of the 1870s, very intricately knowledgeable of those and how I could utilize them. I don't know. I'm going to have to think on that one. That's a good question. Cheddar, have you ever modified a 45-70 single shot into a percussion cap muzzleloader? No, I have not. But here's a funny little fact. If you go look at the Alamo with John Wayne and freeze frame it ever so often, you'll notice that 3/4 of those guns are not flintlocks. They're actually shot trap doors. You put a fake flintlock on it to make it look like it, but it's actually a single shot trap door. And in fact, when you look at Davy Crockett in the Alamo fight, when they go to shoot at the cannon, the guy that comes running around beside Davy before the Indian brings up a bit, he's got a trap door with fake flintlock components on it. What items have you taken on a hiking trip and then realized you didn't use or need? For a long time, I wanted to carry a much more elaborate compass than I needed. I carried way overkill, really, on tactical things. I wanted to carry a bigger knife or I wanted to carry whatever. And I real quickly figured out that was not what I really needed. I've carried packs, I've carried gear, I've carried too many battery powered lights, stuff like that. So my typical rule of thought is whenever I get back, whenever I'm packed up to come home, the first thing I do is I look in the pack and see what's in there that didn't get used this entire camp out. So if I pull this out and this entire camp out, this thing never got used, it gets laid on the ground and I repack my pack and then it goes on top of the pack. And when I got home, that came out of the pack and that went up on the shelf. Still there, need it, right? And unless I think about it or need it, then it got traded off. And you start streamlining your gear down to what you really use and what you got knowledge of. And one of my favorite sayings is the more knowledge you have, the less BS you carry. You know, they say the more you know, the less you carry. That's true. I think it really should say the more knowledge you have, the less BS you're going to carry. And it doesn't mean I won't carry that comfort item, that little BS whatever that was neat. Heck, I carry a little bitty fan, put my hammock in the summer because I'm inside of a mosquito net, right? I'll put it at the far side where it's sucking air in and blowing. It'll actually pressurize the hammock and cause the mosquito net to push out. And it's a lot cooler. And I've had people laugh at me going, Blake, you're toting a fan. Yeah. I'm about to go to bed and it's 80 degrees and sweltering. Yeah. Fire up the ceiling fan and put a little breeze blowing on in, etc. Great little comfort item. That don't ride every time. It's only in the heat of summer. But you'll find what your needs are and your niches are. Kodak, old CVA Bobcat that came from a buddy who got it from someone else, didn't clean after shooting, and the nipple is rusted and stuck. Any suggestions? Kerosene, PB blaster, Kroll oil is the best thing. Make sure the gun is completely unloaded. Run the ramrod down, pull it out, and measure it. Make sure the chamber is completely unloaded. If not, you've got to unload it. Run something down. After that, heat. Get a soldering iron. If the gun has no gunpowder in it, say again, no gunpowder in it, take the soldering iron and put it directly on the nipple and hold it and let it heat up the nipple. That will break the rust bond from there to the rest of the barrel. So heat it up, let it get warm. Hold that thing there 5 minutes. Take it off, let it cool for a half hour till you can touch it. Go back and do it again. Do that 2 or 3 times and let it expand and contract, and it'll break that rust where you should be able to then with the penetrating oil get it to come out. If that don't work, you got to go with a torch then. I mean, that I have found that trick works most times. Miss Chelsea telling me, shut up talking and read the comments. Okay. Anything Goes first rifle was a Norinco STS paratrooper. Those were nice. Do people bring campers or RVs to your gathering, and is it under canvas or is it all canvas? Both. Feel free to bring either one. Pink likes to camp out in the back of his redneck camper, which is pickup with the cover on it. I did one time. I think one of my events I did that. So yeah, bring it out. It's fine. There'll be hammocks, there'll be tents, there'll be whatever. Feel free. Antonio, thank you for posting that. Okay, Chris McCarthy, what AR platform ammo would you go with? Okay, this is going to be a radical departure, guys. I would go with the old 50 or 55 grain bullet because it was not stable and on impact it tumbled. And if it has to be 5.56 because that's the cheap blasting ammo and most of your arsenal, you're going to fill up with that. It will actually tumble on impact. And this is what we had in Vietnam. The later 62s and all like that do not perform well in the real world. They're so stable, they go right through the target, and it's just like you stabbed them with a knitting needle, and it doesn't do a whole lot of damage. It's great when they're beyond 100 yards, but less than that, it goes. They talk about in real combat of you seeing dust fly off the bad guy, and he keep going. So the 50 and 55 grain actually tumbles on impact, whereas the 62 stuff like which was designed to penetrate helmets isn't that good. So if I was going for an AR and I was not allowed to use 2.3, which is usually more accurate than any 5.56 ammo, and that stated is the military standard for 5.56 ammo is a 36-inch cone of fire at 300 meters, a hula hoop size group. 2.23 has to be able to hit that can at 300 yards, or else it ain't a varmint cartridge. That's reason 2.23 is much more expensive than 5.56. It has to be able to perform better. So accuracy is always going to go to the 2.23 ammo. And if you're looking at it for hunting, always go 223. 5.56 is illegal to hunt with in most places because it's non-expanding ammunition. Sir Smoke Slot, congratulations. Hang with it. Staying off grid. Ryan, no, I didn't get to fishing this recent one, but I thought about it. Didn't get to. I'm planning on doing some fishing when I hold my gathering. I'm probably going to sneak out there with a canoe before then to out to the lake and try it out. Chuck and Steel, what is your go-to pack for 2 nights in the woods? I've got my Nighthawk knapsack now, which is perfectly fine for up to 3 days, at least with my stuff. And if I was going to tell you for something else to grab off the internet or whatever, look for the German Alpine rucksack. Great. It's tapered, fits the body well, and it'll easily handle your camping needs for 2 to 3 days. And they're available. Choir Boys, good evening, sir. I was just about to close up, sir, but thank you for dropping in. Which is a better, more efficient saw for processing wood in a campsite, bow saw or folding saw? If you're doing it to process firewood for all night, bow saw, definitely. However, saying that big, huge, silky saw that opens up like a samurai sword, it's so big, does a really good job. Dan Lutz had one of that. I mean, that thing opened up, was 3 feet or longer. And we were going through 10-inch logs, and about as fast as I could do it with a bow saw. So either one would work, but I'm just old school bow saw is what I'd go with. Those long silkies work well too, but they're kind of expensive. And you got to remember, it's just a blade. It's always on the pull stroke. If you bend it, it's going to go. Whereas a trained bow saw is much more rigid and is a little more forgiving, especially if the wood tries to bend against or something. Anything goes. That was it. Katana Boy. That's what he had. And I was very impressed with its ability. Jeff, the MC2, the military compass is death by detail. Too fine a click. The military compass, like the Kaminga and stuff, was really designed for calling in artillery, and it's really good for that, but it's overkill. And it really, especially when you're in low light and etc., and you're trying to dial in clicks, it's too fine a compass. And whereas the MC2 is that engineer compass is actually faster to use, especially in low light conditions or etc. And so most people just go with MC2s because I don't use a Kaminga, although I learned on a Kaminga and can use a Kaminga, but it is a little too technical and a little too, I go with something a little easier. Okay, guys, that's 2 hours. I'm going to say bye here. Thank y'all very much for tuning in. We'll be doing it again next week. Again, to Pink and Chelsea and Trapper Dan and Miss Pam and everybody else, all my friends, and Gray Wolf and Justin, and all, thank you very much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I look forward to these, and I'll go back and read all the comments in case I missed something. But I'm going to the woods and going to be camping out this weekend. I'll try to get a little bit of footage of that. We're going to be up on Duggar Mountain, Alabama, the Southeast Bushcraft Base Camp out with Mark Hudson's putting on it. They call it Frozen Foot. And it's going to be down in the 20s. And that's at the ground level. It's supposed to be in the 20s. And we're going to be 1,000+ feet up. So we'll see how chilly it's going to be. And the hot tent's going, and I got my little stove already packed, so we'll be going. Have a good night, guys, and thank you very much for your support. Till next time, guys, have a safe journey.